Welcome to This Got Me Thinking, a show where clarity comes from conversation and the ideas that spark from it. I am your host, Chris LaFay, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Matthew Olson. We all know the stress of when business gets shaky, right? Revenue stops dropping, you start seeing clients leave, your marketing efforts just are not being as fruitful as they once were. And during those times, it's really easy to start tacking in new service offerings, right? Especially as a marketing agency. Your one thing that you're doing isn't selling as much. So it's like, oh, hey, how can we take our website business and how do we tackle on ads or SEO or brand messaging or any of those types of things? It's simple, right? You go back to your current customers and be like, hey, we also have this new service. Do you want it now? But very rarely does adding more service lines into the mix in a reactive way solve long-term problems. And this is something that Matthew was experiencing a while back ago in his agency. And rather than diving into selling more, he built a better way to show results.
One of the great agency questions we always get asked is, how do I know is this working? And it was coming up time and time again. And at the time, it was literally just ahead of COVID. And so we were looking at saying, you know what, man, we're getting hit with this all the time. The question is like, how do we know things are working? And would say, oh, you'll see the results in like your Google Analytics or things like that. But the problem is like more and more of the clients were completely unfamiliar with Google Analytics, completely unfamiliar with Facebook Insights, go down the list of any of the reporting platforms. And because there was analytics over here, Search Console over there, and all of these different platforms bringing in all this different data, almost none of the clients were seeing the requisite value out of what we were doing. And so it begged the question, how do we demonstrate the value of the marketing efforts we're doing that doesn't require them to be fluent in all the different analytics platforms? And so after doing some research, we came across basically a data visualization tool from Google called Data Studio at the time, now called Looker Studio. And we were able to build a tech stack that essentially could bring in all of the different data with connectors from Facebook, Instagram, MailChimp, or Constant Contact, Google Ads. All these different platforms had the ability to bring this data in. And then Looker Studio gives you the ability to visualize the data in a completely different fashion than what you would see if you logged into Analytics or Search Console. So you can actually use this data dashboard to paint a picture of your marketing data performance. And so when COVID came along, we all recognized that, hey, you know what? This is a great opportunity to teach ourselves something new. And so that's essentially what I took on. Is like, okay, I'm going to take this downtime and I'm going to learn how to build a data dashboard. And so we started doing this, and the clients started to see their data completely differently. They started understanding what it was like to have trends. They could actually customize the date range and be able to export PDF reports that allowed them to present to their own like board of directors or what have you. And so we started building out several of these dashboards for tourism organizations, for manufacturing companies, even for like zipline adventure centers. And what we were able to do is paint a lot more understandable picture of how their marketing was performing. And that just kicked open the doors for not only a huge opportunity to bring a new service to clients, but it also brought the opportunity for us to talk a lot more in depth about strategy. It really flipped the dynamic going from just reporting on performance to give us strategic advice based off this data.
Why did making the pivot matter so much to you? Obviously, you had downtime at your disposal, right? Based on the timeline of it being around COVID, yeah, you had time to kind of just play around with stuff. Totally get that. But why did you choose this project over the other things that you could have done? Why did it matter?
When you start having a discussion about data, it generally goes hand in hand with a discussion about the value you as an agency bring your client. And if you can say, okay, here's the data for the marketing efforts you've had over the last 30 days, 12 months, 2 years, go down the list. And you can turn around and say, okay, this gives you a visual way to see how valuable our marketing services are to your organization. And it really starts driving that value proposition home when you start looking at it as we're not just order takers as an agency. You need a brochure, we got it. You need a new website, we got it.
What was the trend line that you were seeing leading up into this that you knew that you wanted to kind of put a squash to?
The trend we were beginning to see is a decline in renewals. So we'll be working for a client for a year, creating engaging social media content, well clicked on email newsletters, website content that was bringing in organic search. But at the end of that year, a lot of business leaders were looking at it and going, okay, well, you guys, we paid you a good amount of money. You did all of this stuff. You guys were busy, but were you effective? And that's where we started seeing a sharp decline in renewal rates. Now, by adding this data component into it, it added that value component into it. And going beyond saying, okay, we're doing all of these activities. Now we can say we're doing all these activities, and here are the KPIs that are moving the needle and making an impact to your top line revenue.
When you were considering what to do with your time in 2020, and you obviously went down the route of the data visualization piece, what were areas that you considered putting time into to help solve that churn problem that you decided ultimately not to go down the path?
Definitely explored the idea of going a lot harder into digital ad management, starting to get into media purchasing. There were a few other avenues that we could have expanded into, but it still kind of looped us back to that same renewal value proposition that we would still have a challenge with. And that's where we turned around and said, okay, you know what? Yes, we could do all of these other activities later, but right out of the gate, being able to deliver tangible values with data will allow us to hang on to clients a lot longer.
What pushed you to add on more services rather than doubling down on the services that you already have and going deeper into those?
I kind of evaluated the whole process like, okay, what are we good at? And we started looking at saying we're fantastic storytellers. And that's what we need to kind of lean into. And so in addition to the content strategy, the content creation, the web development, we recognized that we needed to be fluent in not only creating and developing a brand's story, but we also need to be expert at deploying it. And that was kind of the yes, it kind of sounds like, oh, that's not really niching down, but that kind of gives us the horizontal bar of targeting. We then turned around and looked at the verticals we wanted to connect with. And we looked at specifically like contract manufacturers. And so we'd be able to put together a value statement saying, look, we can collaborate with your contract manufacturing organization to surface and share the stories that make them unique and be able to share that story across a huge variety of distribution channels. As that progressed, it kind of started falling into just exactly how the buying cycle has changed, especially in the B2B market, of you're now facing buying committees. People are no longer doing a Google search to start their process. They're really diving into talking to colleagues, looking at trade publications. They're looking to gather information that will influence their decision prior to them being in quote unquote buy mode.
Going back to the whole pivot into data and structure and learning about how legitimate data and organized data can help. When did you realize that this was working?
Believe it or not, pretty quickly. Probably 6 months after we launched our first dashboard, we had one of our tourism clients, an executive director of what I'd say is a medium-sized city, their tourism organization, flat out looked at me and says, "You save me about 8 hours a month." And when she had made that statement, it very much resonated. And in talking with some of that first several clients that signed on to the data dashboards, the theme was universal. This saves us time. This allows us to take complex marketing data and put it in a format that makes sense to our volunteer boards of directors. On the manufacturing side, it allows the director of marketing or the vice president of sales and marketing to be able to take a report and put it in front of the C-suite or leadership and say, see, this is what it means. And that delivers a whole new level of value. And so where the next kind of phase came from it is, great, this data now looks fantastic, but what does it mean and what do we do with it? Is where we were then able to turn around and say, okay, you know what? We can meet with you on a regular basis to review the data, give guidance, and recommendations. And that is probably one of the most helpful things that started the switch from us being an order taker agency to starting to become a strategic agency.
Now that you've started creating some systems and processes for this, how are you now taking these wins and getting it farther out there to other folks that you're not working with right now?
Probably one of the biggest things that has been helpful has been that voice of client. The social proof, the testimonials, things like that really do help. Because we are showcasing and marketing this service in one of the tight verticals that we're servicing, people talk to each other. And so, like, for example, we're very heavily vested in Wisconsin tourism. So the number of communities in Wisconsin that kind of fit the bill for a dashboard like this, there's not that many. But we took about, over the last 18 months, we've captured about 10% of that total addressable market with people who have signed up for dashboards. Some of them are 1 and 2 person organizations. Some are 15 to 20 person organizations. And when you are able to build a dashboard that can fit the needs of one of the major metropolitan areas of Wisconsin and have them go, wow, yeah, that's where you celebrate. And so that's kind of where we're continuing to build on it, because yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you're going to spend how much per year on this? And then honestly, we knock on wood, we have not had anyone not renew yet.
Going back to kind of the beginning of all of this and thinking about, your initial problem was churn. You saw non-renewals happening. For folks that are experiencing that type of client interaction where churning is happening, what questions would you challenge those folks to think through of how to avoid churn?
Probably the best way to start avoiding churn is going to be establishing what those KPIs are that matter to your customer. Having your customer identify what matters most is going to be the biggest solution to them not renewing. So what we have found is as churn started becoming more and more of a problem, we really started diving in very deeply in terms of, okay, what does success look like? Let's flash forward 12 months. What do you want to see out of this? Now, depending on the organization you're talking to, tourism, manufacturing, the answer is going to be different. But ultimately, it's going to be, how can you make sure your marketing activities, A, align with leadership, B, align with sales, and C, have very tangible KPIs. We want to increase repeat customers' purchases by $15 per purchase. That's a tangible objective. We want to see an increase in zipline adventure bookings by 10% year over year. That's a tangible thing that can be fixed. But by establishing that up front and having the data available to monitor it, you start eliminating surprises. And when you can eliminate surprises, you're really going to start seeing that resistance to renewals fading away.
One of the small things that Matthew said towards the end was around the best way to avoid churn is eliminating surprises. And you know how to eliminate surprises when you're talking to your customers and you understand what problems that you and your team are solving for them. And I'm actually having conversations right now within our own agency of how do we eliminate surprises during the sales cycle. And I know it sounds kind of small at the end of the day, but one thing I'm a huge proponent of is the video content that goes out from me and my company, and the video content that comes out during the sales process, and like the Loom videos that are sent over. I love for those to look like what people are going to experience when we do video calls, because we're in the day of age where most of our conversations with customers are through video. And what I don't want to see is a website and marketing materials that are going out that all have this like highly produced professional video. Because then when they hop on a video call with any of our team members, they're seeing a completely different side of who that person is, not this completely professionalized thing that you're not going to get to experience. And so I'm a huge proponent of, especially in small businesses, the video that you do for customer acquisition and things along those lines. If it matches your brand personality, keep it using the webcams and the structure that people are going to be interacting with on a daily basis with your team. Because now the videos that they see on social media and on your website will line up exactly with how they're going to be communicating with that person one-on-one long term. And so rather than going and investing in this humongous production of video strategy, invest less money and help your team members kind of upgrade their look directly, within their own home offices effectively, so that you can have a slightly elevated visual appearance online, but it also then matches up one-to-one when they actually meet these people for the first time. And so I know it's a very, very micro thing to dive into, but it solves the problem of reducing surprises, because a client never knows, when they're on one of those like calendar pages, right? And they're scheduling a time to talk because they're finally ready to make a purchase or potentially a purchase. They never know what's going to be on the other side of that, like what that experience is going to be during that conversation. And so the less surprises that you can have and the more in line your marketing can match up with the sales process, the better. That's what Matthew got me thinking.